welcome to Sewbliss. Today I'm going to show you the second video in the three-part series on how to make 3 different stuffed animals. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make an elephant. Now, just like in the first video, the supplies that you're going to need for this project are: first, you're going to need your fabric. I just used 1/4 yard of cotton and flannel, and I still have a ton left over. Next, you're going to need your pattern, and like before, I just hand drew mine, so I'll leave a link to the PDF below. Then I just used some stuffing I got from the fabric store, and then we'll just be using all of our basic sewing supplies, including the iron. Now, let's get started. Now your first step is going to be getting the pattern ready. Once you have the pattern ready, you're then ready to cut it out. So here I have mine laid on my fabric, and you can see that I have my fabrics right sides together, so that way I'm cutting a left side and a right side. Make sure you do that so that way they'll match up and you'll be able to sew them together. And I have just pinned them onto my fabric and I'm ready to cut them out. With all my pieces cut out, I'm then going to take the ears and the tail, and I can take my pattern pieces off. And since mine are already right sides together, mine are ready to go. So just place right sides of the fabric together for both your ears and then your tail, and then we're going to stitch around the ear and the tail. But on both pieces, on the ear we're going to leave this part open right here so that we can turn it right sides out, and we're going to sew that into the seam when we actually sew the elephant, so we won't need to sew it down just yet. So just sew from this point all the way around to this point, and then on the tail I'm going to sew from this point down and around to this point, leaving this part open so that way again I can turn it right sides out, and we'll sew it into the elephant later on. Now, after sewing the ear pieces together, before you turn it right sides out, we need to do a little trimming around the curves so that way it curves nicely when you turn it right side out, and it just will look really nice. So what you're going to do is around the curve, you're just going to put in little triangles. So I'm just going to put, and they're pretty little baby ones, they're just in your seam allowance, which you should have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm not cutting through the stitching we just made, I'm just cutting to it. You can't really see my stitching along here, but I'm just cutting to that stitching, not through it, or you'll have to re-sew it. I'm just cutting little triangles right next to each other. And this is going to take out the bulk of the fabric, so that way the curve will lay nicely. So it should look something like this, and I'm going to do that on this corner and on my other earpiece. Now when you get to the tail, before you turn it right sides out, just make sure that you trim your seams because they might be a little bulky, and then trim the corners a little bit, making sure you don't cut where you sewed. But that will just make it so it'll be a little bit easier to turn right sides out. And this one is a little trickier to turn right sides out. So just take your time and maybe use a safety pin or a needle, something small that can help you turn it to the right side. Now when these 3 pieces are turned to the right side, we're next going to take them over to the iron and just give them a good pressing so that way they lay nicely and we have the curves looking nice. Now with my smaller pieces all ready to go, I'm now ready to sew the actual elephant. And we're actually going to be sewing these pieces into the elephant when we sew the elephant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the ears on the inside, and I'm going to be placing them in the middle like a sandwich. And the same with the tail. So I'm going to be placing the tail right where I want it, just on the inside, so that way I can sew it in that seam. So once I have everything in place, I can then put the right sides together like a sandwich and pin all the way around. Now when you go to sew the elephant, we're going to be sewing all the way around it at 1/4 inch, but we are going to be leaving about a 2 inch to a 3 inch gap, so that way we can turn it right sides out and add the stuffing. So make sure to leave that opening or you won't be able to turn it right sides out. Now after your elephant is sewn and you have left a 2 to 3 inch opening to turn it right sides out, before we turn it right sides out, we're going to trim just like we did the ears. We're going to trim around all of the curves, so like the trunk right here and the head right up here and back here on the butt and on the feet. We need to trim all of these so that way they lay nicely. And right here as it goes in, we actually need to just cut slits so that way it can open up and spread a little more and will lay nicely. So now I'm going to do all my trimming before I turn it right sides out. Now here is what mine looks like before I turn mine right sides out. So you can see all my trimmed corners, and then even on the corner up here I actually trimmed those off so there wasn't as much bulk in there. And then I clipped in here and in all these corners so that way it can fold in nicely. So now I'm ready to turn it right sides out. Here's my elephant after I turned him right sides out. So now I'm going to take him over to my ironing board, and I'm actually going to iron him out a little bit. Just make sure everything's laying nicely and pull out all the little pieces that are still tucked in. And especially the ears, I'm going to iron those ears down. Hopefully they'll stay down nicely. If not, we can tack them down. And then lastly, I'm going to iron this opening right here. And we're going to stuff it with stuffing first, but we're then going to stitch it closed. So I want to iron that down. Just fold those raw edges in 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll iron those down, and that will get it ready for us to hand sew it. Now with the ironing done, I'm then going to start stuffing the elephant. And you're going to want to start so that you get the farthest part first. So I'm going to get the trunk first, and that's the smallest part. So I'm just going to do small pieces at a time and just take it and stuff it in there. And really try and work it the farthest part of the trunk so that way it'll look nice and hold up nicely. Now once you have the elephant stuffed the way you want it, next we're going to close up that seam that we left open to stuff it. And all you're going to need is a needle and a thread, and I use 2 strands of thread on my needle, so that will just help it to hold up stronger. You can use 1 if you would like. So here I have my opening pinned together, and I'm just going to start at the end, and you can kind of see where my threads ended. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little piece from the red side and start there, and I'm going to try and get it on the inside so that way my knot will be on the inside. Now once I have my knot in place, all I'm going to be doing is going back and forth, taking little chunks from each side and piecing them together so that way it holds nicely. So now I'm going to take from the pattern side, and the stitches that I'm just taking them from that 1/4 inch seam that we ironed down. So you can see that my line is right along here, and I'm taking a stitch from that line so that way it'll be hidden. So you can see once you pull tight, it closes that seam up. So I'm just going to do that all the way down. Now after you're done closing up that seam, I just tied a knot and then put the threads through to the middle. Now I'm going to just add an eye to my elephant, and I'm just going to do that with a needle and a thread. And you could do any shape of eye you want, circle, just a line, an X, or you could even just do a button. But I'm just going to probably do a circle on mine. And I'm just going to start stitching in the same place over a couple of times and just see how it goes. Now when you're all done with the eye, you can just tie it off and put the threads through to the middle. And now you are all done with your elephant. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out the first video in this series and stay tuned for the last video in this series. Also, make sure to subscribe to Sewbliss, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!